Hello friends, Hansen here, and welcome back to the DualShock Debrief, my weekly PlayStation analysis video where I analyze the general video game news of the week with a focus on Sony's PlayStation. This is Debrief number 5. Fellas, this week we've got a batch of interesting things to talk about, ranging from Shawn Layden, the former CEO of PlayStation's comments about exclusivity in the video game industry and how it could potentially not be such a great thing in the end as the cost of developing games continues to increase. And then on top of this, we've got a bunch of interesting news on the PlayStation side of the house, ranging from the closure of London Studio, the former creator of SingStar, which was the PlayStation 2 singing video game, as well as Blood and Truth, the VR game for PlayStation VR 1. That's obviously a more sad piece of news, but then we pick it up a little bit in the end with some hope for the Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic remake. I also cover my progress with the Sekiro Platinum as well as my next Platinum in Elden Ring for the PS4 version. If that sounds good to you fellas, then be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more videos similar to this one. Fellas, I hope you are having a great week so far, but let's not dilly-dally any longer. Let's get into the big one. Shawn Layden's comments regarding exclusivity in the video game industry. I think he has a lot of interesting insight here, given that PlayStation really made its current legacy of having groundbreaking exclusive games that sold a bunch of consoles in the PlayStation 4 generation when he was CEO. Anyways, my dudes, here is the direct quote. Quote, "It reduces your addressable market," end quote, Layden said before citing the success of Arrowhead's Helldivers 2, which launched on PlayStation 5 and PC to explosive success. Particularly when you're in the world of live service gaming or free-to-play, another platform is just another way of opening the funnel, getting more people in. In a free-to-play world, as we know, 95% of those people will never spend a nickel, but the business is all about conversion. You have to improve your odds by cracking the funnel open. Helldivers 2 has shown that for PlayStation coming out on PC at the same time. Again, you get that funnel wider, you get more people in, end quote. So fellas, you might be asking yourself, why the hell did Hansen make this one the big one? This is just a general piece of knowledge that everyone in video games knows. I chose this to make the central piece of news of the video game industry this week because exclusivity has been such a massive and focal conversation as of recently. Between the topic of Xbox exclusives finally coming over to PlayStation, as well as the fact that Helldivers 2 is not on Xbox when it could potentially have a much bigger market, as Layden says here, I just really felt that this captured the current vibe of where this industry and its culture and its gamers are at. And I think that it's really important that Shawn Layden, as the ex-CEO of Sony Interactive Entertainment, was the one to make this comment because he would really have the most insight into how much video games cost to make and the realities on the development side of the house compared to the commercial success that many of these exclusives will experience. You have to ask yourself, when a game like God of War Ragnarok costs $200 million to make, what is the profit margin of that compared to the profit margin of this game being released on basically everything that can play a screen? It's a very worthwhile question to ask, and a question that I think is going to continue to be answered as we continue to solve this problem of exclusives of the video game industry and what their future is going to be. Now, don't let me fool you. I really do believe that good games sell consoles. I genuinely do believe that. But at the same time, are these console sales going to outweigh the potential profit margins that these games can make on other platforms? It's a worthwhile question to ask, and that's why I chose to make this the big one for this week, boys. And with that, my dear friends, let's get into the PlayStation news items. And let me tell you, boys, we got some lows and we got some highs this week. So without any further dilly-dallying, let's get into it. Number 1. Last week, Sony leadership decided to lay off employees in an effort to trim down its workforce and cut roughly 8% of its jobs within PlayStation. Notable studios that were impacted include most prominently London Studio, who was shuttered as a result of this decision. London Studio is most well known for developing the SingStar series, which is most associated with the PlayStation 2 generation, although it was available to play on the PS3 and PS4. They also developed games for the PlayStation EyeToy, the PS2 peripheral, as well as the PSVR, where they made Blood and Truth, which was a pretty well received PSVR game for the first iteration of Sony's VR side hustle. It was reported that they were working on some sort of fantasy-themed games as a service set within the city of London, but that too has been cancelled with the closure of the studio. This makes this the third of 3 PlayStation Live service games that have been cancelled, following The Last of Us Online from Naughty Dog and Twisted Metal, which was in development at Firesprite. However, London Studio was not the only development studio impacted by these layoffs. Naughty Dog and, surprisingly enough, Insomniac, who have been responsible for the greatest output of games throughout the PS5 generation, despite the fact that Naughty Dog has primarily done remasters. All in all, the studios that were affected include Insomniac, Naughty Dog, Guerrilla, Firesprite, and of course, London Studio. Bottom line, Sony Interactive Entertainment laid off 8% of its workforce, or about 900 people. So fellas, yes, very, very sad indeed. Of course, it's always sad when people are laid off, but it's also important to think about and discuss why these decisions were made in the first place. And I think when zooming out, there's an overlap between all of these studios in some varying degree. Now, we know that a live service game has been in the works in some meaningful way at each of these studios. Between Insomniac with the supposed Spider-Man live service game, Naughty Dog with the cancelled Last of Us Online, Firesprite with Twisted Metal, London Studio with, of course, the aforementioned fantasy MMO that was set in London, and finally, while I don't really think there's a direct connection with Guerrilla, we do know that there is a Horizon MMO in the works. This may be some conspiracy theory thinking, but I just really think that this is a sign of the times of these live service endeavors not really paying off in the way that Sony had anticipated. Don't get me wrong, I definitely think that PlayStation needs to be in the games as a service area, and they need to be making these kind of games, and they've made a banger with Helldivers 2 in a lot of ways, and that is a surprising smash hit in many different ways that I'm sure that they didn't anticipate. But it's clear that a lot of these games and a lot of the internal studio support that it takes to make games like this aren't really panning out in the way that they anticipated. Like, The Last of Us Online was far and away the most promising out of all of these live service games, but the fact that that got canceled should really say something to all of us. This is the direct quote from Jim Ryan. Quote, "We looked at our studios and our portfolio, evaluating projects in various stages of development, and have decided that some of those projects will not move forward," end quote. We are not told what those projects are, which leaves us to speculate, and speculate we most certainly will. This leads me to believe that this is a drawing back on live service games at these various studios that probably were founded to do more single-player exclusive games, but time will only tell here. I think it's interesting that this happened. Definitely very sad, definitely very unfortunate that these workers lost their jobs and that many of these projects in various stages of development will not be able to be seen and appreciated for the work that was put into it. But I have to connect the dots here, and I really just assess that this is a reduction in the efforts on games as a service within PlayStation. So there we go, 3 more live service games have been taken off the board of the potential over 10 that were in development in PlayStation Studios, so very interesting to note. PlayStation news item number 2. The Sony-published Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic remake news continues to undulate, and as of the current news cycle, there is hope for the long-anticipated remake yet. It was reported a few months ago by Bloomberg's Jason Schreier, who is commonly sourced as a rock-solid games journalist, that the game is still in development by a handful of people. Here is the recounting of the saga that this remake has been on. In 2020, Saber Interactive is acquired by Embracer. In February 2021, Aspyr is acquired by Embracer. Embracer says that Aspyr will work as a development arm for Saber Interactive. September 2021, PlayStation announces at its showcase in September that Aspyr is remaking Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. August 2022, Embracer announces that Aspyr is no longer working on the game and that development has been moved to a different studio. Sometime in 2023, Saber Interactive claims that they are working on the game, taking the project over from Aspyr. March 2024, Bloomberg's Jason Schreier claims that people are still working on the project, and Twitter/X user Lee June, with 3 O's by the way, noticed that at some point in early March, the site changed to remove references to Embracer Group, that is, Saber Interactive's website. Saber Interactive released World War Z and Evil Dead, the game, but apart from this, hasn't developed very many new games as a developer. They're mostly responsible for ports and remasters and have never remade a game, so it's unclear what the Knights of the Old Republic remake will be or how it will play. Additionally, it remains unclear if PlayStation is even still involved at all. So yes, that's the rub. This reminds me a lot of the Final Fantasy VII remake and how that was really changing developers a bunch. And it was even debated and believed by some people that that game would never see the light of day. My thoughts on this are PlayStation even going to publish this game now that it's going independent, now that Saber Interactive is going independent from Embracer? And it really calls into question if this game's even going to be good if it does come out. And I don't really think any developer worth their salt would dare remake this game if it wasn't good, but it really just calls into question everything surrounding this project. But nonetheless, Knights of the Old Republic fans, you may have hope yet that your beloved game may be remade, as I know there's many of you out there. I actually dabbled in Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic a few years ago. I think it was in like 2020, 2021, sometime in that time frame. I played it on my Mac, and I gotta say that the RPG still holds up to this day, although it is in desperate need of a remake because it has a few wonky game mechanics, but it's still an amazing video game. And fellas, that is all I have for the PlayStation news items for this week. I will now conclude with what I've been playing. So, I have been on the journey to platinum Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, and let me tell you, dude, this game rules. Dude, I love Sekiro. I think it's an amazing Souls-like. I do actually think it's a Souls-like. I know that's up for debate among many From Software fans out there. I think it definitely is. It has all the hallmarks, and it's a very, very challenging game. I realize that that's common knowledge, but I have been stuck on the Demon of Hatred and on Owl Father. I was stuck on them for a very long time. I did beat both of them. I beat the game, in fact. I thought Ishin, the Sword Saint, the final boss of the game, was actually pretty easy, all things considered. He definitely took me a few tries to get down, but I really saw him as the final test of the game. If you did not have all of the mechanics mastered, then you definitely were not going to beat him, but he was an awesome boss fight. The game rules. I am on the quest to platinum it. Unfortunately, you have to replay the game in order to platinum it. My New Game Plus run is going by pretty quickly. I've already defeated the Guardian Ape, and should be platinuming it by the end of the week, I would imagine. The last thing that I have to do is upgrade all of the Shinobi skills, which is going to take a lot of farming, and then I have to get all of the Lapis Lazuli that you use to upgrade the ninja tools in the game, which you have to do in 2 separate playthroughs, which I think is kind of dumb. But nonetheless, it's a great game, so I don't mind replaying it again, although it is a little frustrating. But the From Software news from your boy Hansen doesn't stop there, because I have also been playing Elden Ring. I am playing the PS4 version of the game and want to get the PlayStation 4 Platinum in addition to my PlayStation 5 Platinum that I already have. It is as Thanos said, they called me a madman. I will be doing a quality build for this playthrough. I absolutely adore this game. I think it's probably one of my top 5 games of all time at this point. I think it's completely amazing and revolutionary and just simply incredible. And I cannot wait for Shadow of the Erd Tree. I am going to be in there day one, and I'm even contemplating taking time off of work to play it. Anyways, fellas, that is all I've got for this week's episode of the DualShock Debrief. Very interesting. As I said, highs and lows. London studio was dead and gone, unfortunately, for those workers there. And we have hope for the Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic remake again. It's very interesting. But that's all I've got, my dudes. This is Hansen with Ent Media, out.